What if all the technological advances you are used to using in your daily life suddenly stop working? One day, out of nowhere, you could no longer use your cell phone. You wouldn't have electricity in your house or running water. All vehicles would stop working, and worst of all, you would lose all the money you had. A family lives in an apartment somewhere in Tokyo. Here we met the mother, Mitsue, who is on the phone with her father, Sasaki. He just sent them a box of fresh fish and recently harvested vegetables. But the family, including the mother, find any food that isn't pre-cooked unappealing. She even mistakes one of her daughter's fake eyelashes for a cockroach. The daughter's name is Yui, and she spends all day on her cell phone. The father's name is Yoshi, and he's oblivious to everything because he's glued to the TV. Shortly after, Kenji, the eldest son, arrives. He enters the apartment without greeting anyone, keeps his headphones on, and goes straight to his computer. We realize that each of them is lost in their own world, and they barely communicate with each other. But what they don't know is that all of this is about to change. The next morning, Yoshi wakes up late to find his alarm clock never went off. When he checks it, he notices the hands are frozen. Just then, Mitsu informs that the entire area has suffered a power outage as she finally throws the fish in the trash. Shortly after, she also wakes up Yui, who panics when she discovers her phone battery is dead. The mother tries to make breakfast, but both the rice cooker and the induction cooktop have stopped working. After several attempts, she manages to light a small gas burner. Even so, no one wants to wait for her to finish cooking, and the whole family leaves the apartment without breakfast. Upon leaving the building, they discover that the elevator is also out of order, forcing all the residents to descend several floors using only the stairs. When they arrive at the station, they find more bad news. No trains are running, and no one knows when the service will resume. With no other option, Yoshi sits on foot for the long walk to his office. Meanwhile, Kenji heads to the university by bicycle. When he finally takes off the headphones because of the battery, he realizes that something strange is happening. In fact, bicycles are practically the only means of transportation still circulating in the city, as cars are also out of service. Even a taxi driver tries to start his vehicle using a little water, but all of his efforts are in vain. Meanwhile, Mitsu talks to several neighbors in front of the building, and they all confirm that no one has electricity. They decide to go out together to buy candles and other essential items. Mitsu's about to join them when she remembers she left her purse inside the apartment. Anyway, she thinks that surely, by nightfall, everything will turn to normal. At the same time, Yoshi finally arrives at the company where he works. There, he finds all the employees waiting outside because the doors use electric locks that have stopped working. Two men break one of the windows to allow the staff to enter. However, after climbing several flights of stairs, they discover that they too are unable to do their work. Without computers, lighting, or electrical systems, the office is completely paralyzed. But they still stay to wait in case things return to normal. The same thing is happening at school. Yoi discovers that almost all the students arrived late, and none of them have a working phone. In addition, several teachers couldn't even show up, so many classes are being held directly in the study hall. At university, Kenji is going through a virtual identical situation. At the mini market, all the canned food is sold out. People are panicking, taking all the food, water, toilet paper, and supplies, something like we were in 2020. When they're already in line to pay, the cashier, who's also doing calculations with an abacus, tells them they need cash because the card readers aren't working either. Many people leave the line and try to withdraw money from the ATMs, but they are overwhelmed by the fact that they can't. And this is where the movie starts showing us how dependent we become on technology, even for things we barely think about anymore. The family can't withdraw money because the ATMs are down. They can't use their cars because they depend on electronics and fuel infrastructure. Students can't attend their normal classes, and people can't even go to work the way they normally would. Things that feel completely ordinary suddenly become impossible because the systems supporting them have stopped working. And we've actually seen the smaller version of this kind of reaction in real life. When the pandemic hit in 2020, people rushed to buy toilet paper, food, water, and other basic supplies. Part of the panic came from uncertainty. When we don't know how long a crisis is going to last, our brains tend to focus on getting immediate control of whatever we can. If we don't actually need 10 packs of toilet paper, having them makes us feel a little more prepared for what might happen next. And that's exactly what we see here. The moment people realize that technology they depend on isn't coming back, they start to panic because they don't have no idea what's happening. We don't usually think of ourselves as technological dependent when everything is working. We just go about our day. We tap on our card, turn on a light, check on our phone, and get in a car, take a train, or go to work. There's an entire network of technology quietly taking care of the things for us. The moment the network disappears, we realize how little control we actually have over some of the most basic parts of our lives. And the movie has a lot of fun with this idea. Cash is still technically valuable, but when the machines that give us access to our money stop working, even that starts becoming useless. We've built so much of our society around these systems that we've forgotten how to function without them. And soon, we will see how our modern society in which we live in will start to turn into total chaos within just a few days. After spending several hours doing absolutely nothing, at Yoshi's office, people begin to realize that the power outage is not normal. His boss tells them that they cannot work without computers, and that they should go home until the power returns. Refusing to walk across the entire city again, Yoshi decides to buy a bicycle. However, he discovers that the prices have skyrocketed, because practically everyone is trying to get one. With no other option, he ends up paying much more than usual. When he returns to the building, he finds an elderly woman resting on the stairs, unable to climb so many flights due to exhaustion. Later, during a candlelit dinner, Yoshi insists on continuing to work using pencils and paper. Every time a family member uses the bathroom, they have to flush the toilet by pouring water from the bathtub, since water also won't come out of the sink. Mitsu can't wash the dishes. Meanwhile, the children are completely bored without their cell phones and doing nothing. The two siblings finally go outside, and Mitsu invites the whole family onto the balcony. Without a single light on the entire city, they can contemplate a beautiful sky completely covered with stars. And after all that chaos, we finally get a moment where the family simply sits together and looks at the stars. This might be the first time in a long time Suzuki's family actually being present in the moment while they enjoy their real world together. At the beginning of the movie, they're constantly together, but they're rarely actually with each other. Everyone is absorbed in their own little world. The father is focused on television and work. The kids are glued to their devices, and even during meals, one of the few moments where a family would normally sit down and talk, there's barely any real connection between them. If not, they're just eating junk food in their own room. And I think that's something a lot of us can relate to. Think about family celebrations like Christmas from a few years ago. You might remember everyone sitting around the same table, eating, talking, laughing, and actually being present with each other. Now, it's not unusual to have the whole family gathered in the same room while everyone is looking down at the different screen. We see this in our own day-to-day life in Suzuki's family. They were physically together all the time, but they weren't present with another. Even the mother, who's constantly cooking and taking care of everyone, is performing this traditional role of keeping the family together, but there's a very little appreciation or connection coming back to her. She's physically present but emotionally disconnected from everyone. Even meals, which should be one of the most basic rituals of family life, feel like 4 people occupying the same room than rather a family spending time together. But when the blackout takes away their comforts and distractions, for the first time, they're experiencing something completely ordinary that technology has gradually pushed into the background. Simply being somewhere with the same people you care about and enjoying the moment together. And there's something almost ironic about it. It takes the entire modern world shutting down for this family to finally look up at the same sky. Maybe that's what the stars represent here. Nothing about the sky has changed. They've always been there. That family just hasn't been looking. The third day of the blackout arrives, and we see that things are getting very, very bad. Just like the laundry, the dirty dishes are piling up, and the mess is becoming noticeable in Yoshi's office. His boss tells him not to come to work until the power returns, to which Yoshi replies they need to work for the money. The boss tells him that the situation is very bad, and that living in Tokyo will be very difficult these days. Outside the office, he sees his superior and his family, packing their backpacks to head towards the countryside. Yoshi starts thinking about doing the same, but he's still very sure of his decision. He's about to head home. He discovers a man trying to steal his bicycle and manages to scare him off. Meanwhile, Kenji rides his bike to the neighborhood town, only to find there's no electricity there either. He had actually gone to look for the girl he likes. When he sees her leaving her house, he panics and he hides, watching her and her family leave. The bike falls over and he ends up hurting his foot. At the water treatment plant, Mitsu and several neighbors wait for hours to fill some bottles. However, the employees announce that the facility will remain closed because the pumps have stopped working, although there is still groundwater. They explain that it could be dangerous because it's untreated, so they refuse to extract it manually. The crowd responds indignantly to the lack of help. At the same time, Yoshi goes to the bank, where he's told that the ATMs and debit cards aren't working either. The only way to withdraw money is to present an ID and a bank book. Furthermore, each person can only withdraw the equivalent of $600. The news causes chaos. Everyone starts pushing and shoving to try and get it in first. In the chaos, Yoshi drops all of his documents, and when he tries to pick them up, he gets knocked down by the crowd, suffering a severe nosebleed. By the 7th day of the blackout, supermarkets were out of food and schools remained closed. Many people traveled to neighboring towns in search of food and water, but found only the same situation. Every hour, more residents left Tokyo, hoping to find a solution in the countryside. After a complete unproductive meeting with their neighbors, Yoshi and Mitsu decided to visit an elderly woman in their building, whom they hadn't seen in several days. Upon entering her apartment, they discovered she had passed away and that her family had just arrived to take her body. Shocked by the scene, they both both realized it was time to leave the city as well. That same night, they announced to their children that they would be traveling to the village where Grandpa Sasaki lived. Yoi protested, finding small towns boring, but Mitsu reminded her that she had loved playing on the beach there as a child, even though she didn't remember. After the conversation, the whole family began packing. It's very interesting to think that since there's no way to communicate with others, we don't know if the blackout is only in the city, the country, or the whole world. If this were to happen to us, we wouldn't know if the other side of the world was experiencing the same thing. This was very common in the pre-digital age. There is no way to know what was happening in other areas. And if I think about it, not having an idea what's happening beyond our neighborhood feels somewhat unsettling. But it's just that we're just used to knowing in a second if a catastrophe occurs on the other side of the world, that this lack of knowledge feels strange and vulnerable. The next morning, they pack their bags, gather their savings to leave the city. As they leave the building, they hear the barking of a seemingly abandoned dog, but they decided to continue on the way, which is very sad. They get on the 3 bicycles the boys have. Each rides his own, while Yoshi carries his wife in a trailer behind him. During the ride to the airport, they observe countless people leaving Tokyo on foot. They also encounter vendors offering food and water at exorbitant prices. Yoshi refuses to pay such amounts, though as they continue, they discover that prices keep rising. Finally, they stop at the shop where Mitsu manages to negotiate a better price by buying a larger quantity of supplies. They take advantage of the break to rest and eat something. Nearby, the 2 siblings watch how the situation has worsened for some. They have to start fishing for their own food, but they both feel so much disgust that they don't even consider eating them. When they try to use a public restroom, they discover that the smell is unbearable because the toilets haven't been flushed for days, so they end up relieving themselves behind some bushes. When they finally arrive at the airport, they find a desperate crowd gathered in front of a terminal. Their planes are also grounded, and the police try to contain the crowd by erecting barriers to prevent them from invading the areas. The tension quickly escalates. Part of the crowd ends up chasing the officers, while the rest decide to leave. As night falls, the Suzukis rent a room at the nearest motel. They charge exorbitant prices, but exhausted from their ride, the family accepts. Later that night, Yoi assumes they'll return home, but Yoshi tells her that they can't because they have no food or water, and they'll continue by bicycling. To avoid getting lost, Kenji goes to an abandoned bookstore, and they take a book with a children's map. Even so, Kenji calculates the distance and concludes that it will take them approximately a month to arrive, traveling solely by bicycle. At the same time, Yoshi approached a store where several people with Rolex watches and luxury items were being expelled for not having enough value. Since none of that can benefit the lady at this moment, unlike them, the family manages to exchange some bottles of liquor and a bottle of water for an old bicycle and some food. This scene is very interesting, since a Rolex is a perfect symbol of how quickly our idea of value can change. In a normal society, a luxury watch like that can be worth thousands of dollars. It's a status symbol, something that represents wealth and success. But in this situation, none of that matters anymore. You can't eat a Rolex, you can't drink it can't get you somewhere, and it can't make the electricity come back. It's basically worthless. Meanwhile, things that we normally take for granted like food and especially clean water suddenly become far more valuable as they become harder to find. That's something we don't really think about in everyday life, because most of the time these things are so available that we don't have to consider their actual value. We don't think about the water coming out of the tap as something precious because we assume there'll always be more. But once that consumption disappears, the entire idea of value changes. The movie is basically stripping away the artificial value we place on things and asking a pretty simple question. When everything becomes scarce, what is actually worth something? And pretty soon, the answer isn't going to be luxury, money, or status. It's going to be the things that keep you alive. After a few hours, they reach a road where several other people are passing by. Well, the toll booths no longer charge tolls. They stay under a tree next to a married couple. The couple sees them drinking water and asks for some from the bottle, but the couple tells them they could give it to them in exchange for food. They have to sleep under a tree, and they can barely sleep because of the intense cold. A boy stealthily approaches them and steals a water bottle from Kenji's belongings. He chases them until he reaches a bridge, but he stops when he sees that he did it to feed his baby. At dawn, they continue their journey until they reach a tunnel where there are some elderly women who are blind. The women offer them help, but they continue on their way without paying attention. As they try to cross the tunnel, they find themselves plunged to the darkness and begin to notice some abandoned cars and even raccoon bodies on the ground. Because of this, they have no choice but to return back and ask the elderly woman for help. On the 16th day of the blackout, the family rests by a river and takes the opportunity to wash some of their clothes. They have only a few matches left and have almost used up all their drinking water. Ignoring the warnings of the others, Yoshi decides to drink directly from the river. Hours later,
A violent storm forces the group to take shelter under a bridge as they watch the wind sweep away their bicycles and many of their belongings. Suddenly, Yoshi runs desperately towards an open field. The river water has given him severe diarrhea. When the rain finally stops, everyone goes to collect their things. They discover that the sack of rice is completely covered in mud and one of the bicycle tires is destroyed. Since Yoshi is still feeling very ill, they decide to head to the nearest town as soon as possible. While the parents rest, Kenji and Yoi enter an abandoned supermarket. Unfortunately, there's no food, matches, or tires left. The only thing they manage to find are a flare, several cans of cat food, and battery fluid, which, being distilled water, can still be drunk. Upon returning to their parents, Kenji gives Yoshi a sparkler. When she sees Yoshi struggling with the task of lighting a fire, Yoi tries cat food for the first time and finds it disgusting. Kenji fixes his tire using his cell phone case. After a long time without any food available, they survive on battery water and cat food. During one of their stops, they meet the Satio family, who seem to handle the crisis with complete ease. Accustomed to hiking and camping, they know numerous survival techniques. They teach them how they did it, and tell them about edible herbs that grow everywhere, how to use rivers to purify the water, and even how to eat insects. Other cultures eat too. After talking about various things, one of them takes a picture with a non-digital camera and promises to send it when the power returns. Amidst all of this, seeing how well the Sotu family manages, we notice how Yoshi feels somewhat jealous, as if he's trying to prove that he too can provide for his family. After taking a tour together, the different families say goodbye as they go to their separate ways. The Suzukis continue their journey to Osaka, another major city. On the 33rd day on the blackout, they discover that Osaka is in the same predicament as Tokyo. No electricity, and the situation remains desperate. Yoi completely loses her patience when she realizes they have almost no food or water left, leading to a heated family argument. In the end, they all admit that Yoshiyuki hasn't been a responsible family member during the trip. What makes this other family so interesting is that they never really depend on modern world in the same way as Suzuki family. They always maintain a relationship with the physical world around them. They know how to grow things, how to find food, how to live outdoors, and how to make use of what nature provides. For them, this situation is obviously not ideal, but it isn't completely alien either. And that's a pretty big contrast with Yoshi. His entire identity as a provider was built around a modern system, having a job, earning money, bringing food to the table, using all the infrastructure that makes those things possible. So now, he doesn't feel useful at all. In a way, the Outdoors family represents a completely different relationship with the world. They never stop paying attention to the physical things around them, which makes Yoshi realize just how disconnected his own life had become from all that. The entire Suzuki family was consumed by the technology, while the Camper family shows us that the problem itself is not technology. We are the ones who become useless without it. On day 43, they arrive at the aquarium, where people catch fish and eat them. They join the line hoping to receive some rations, but they arrive just when there's nothing left. Yoshi begs the man who gave them some for his children, but he ends up being ignored. On day 63, with spirits at a rock bottom, the family faces a crisis due to the lack of food and water. One day, while resting in a field, Yoshi is about to eat an insect when they spot a pig not far away. They all join forces to catch it, and with everyone's help, Yoshi manages to subdue it. However, when it comes time to butcher it, no one is willing to do so. At that moment, a man appears nearby and pulls out a knife to butcher it. He introduces himself as Tanaka and invites the whole family to his house. There, they have a large water well, chickens, and meat from the animals. Tanaka offers them a place to stay since he and his wife are too old to catch the pigs that escaped. The Suzukis immediately accept. As a welcome, Tanaka serves them a hearty breakfast that includes smoked pork. After so many days of hunger, the taste is so delicious that Yuri can't hold back her tears. Later, when it's bath time, they discover that even such a routine activity requires considerable effort, as they must draw water from the well with buckets and light a fire with firewood to heat it up. That night, Tanaka lent them pajamas he had bought for her when his son and children came to visit. However, he confesses that they currently live in the United States and he has no way of communicating with them. As they listen to these words, Yoshi and Mitsu realize how fortunate they are to still have their children with them, and end up falling asleep holding their hands. During the following days, the family participates in all the farm chores and gradually learns to live in the countryside. They chase the pigs that keep escaping, repair fences, do laundry, chop wood, and perform various other agricultural tasks. They even end up having fun recapturing the animals. And this is probably the happiest we've seen the Suzuki family since the beginning of the movie. At Tanaka's farm, they're eating together, working together, talking, and for once, nobody seems desperate to escape into a screen or back into their old routine. They're simply enjoying being around each other. And I think this is where we start seeing the family slowly become back together. What's interesting is that this isn't because their problems have disappeared. they have actually been through some pretty terrible things. They have lost the comforts they depend on, they struggled to find food and water, and they had to leave almost everything familiar behind. But somewhere along the way, they started becoming useful to each other. Yoshi can contribute on his own way. The kids can help with things that their parents can't. The mother, who was already taking care of everyone back home, becomes even more important in this new environment. Back home, they were mostly just people occupying the same house. Here, every person actually has something to contribute. They have to rely on each other, and that dependence slowly turns into appreciation. All the crises and difficulties they are experiencing are teaching them that being a family is about sharing experiences, helping each other, and actually being present for one another. And ironically, it took losing almost everything they had to realize how much they already had in each other. Seeing how helpful they are, Tanaka suggests they stay with him because he hates being alone. Despite their growing affection for him, the Suzukis decide to continue their journey to reunite with grandfather Saseki. As a parting gift, Tanaka gives them enough smoked meat to sustain them for the rest of their trip. A few days later, the family reaches a river and discovers with disappointment that the bridge is gone. Yoshi finds some rope and several wooden planks abandoned by the riverbank, so they all work together to build a makeshift raft. First, they manage to get the woman to the other side. Then, when Yoshi and Kenji return to get the bikes, they find themselves trapped in the middle of a storm. As the water starts to flow faster and the current increases, Kenji decides to abandon the bikes to save his life. Yoshi, however, refuses to let go of the bicycles and continues clinging to the wooden debris until its weight finally pulls him under. His family watches helplessly as the current carries him down. When the rain finally stops, Kenji desperately sets out to look for his father, but only manages to find his dad's wig. On the 94th day of the blackout, the family continues along the train tracks. Mitsu is so depressed she can barely walk, forcing Kenji to support her. During a brief stop, they take some of the smoked pork to eat. At that moment, a stray dog appears, whining for food. Yoi tries to give it some meat, but Kenji stops her. Even so, the animal takes advantage of a moment of inattention, snatches the piece of food, and runs off. Shortly after, more dogs appear, and a huge Doberman jumps directly at Mitsu to snatch her backpack. She tries to take it back, but it ends up falling and rolling down a hill. When her children reach her, they discover she has fractured her ankle. As they held her up, they watch as the dogs devour all the food she had in her backpack. With no other option, Kenji and Yui help Mitsu continue walking slowly. Because of their slow progress, the dogs return once again, ready to attack them. The three remained huddled together, bracing the worst. At that precise moment, a steam train appeared on the tracks, and the noise sent the pack fleeing. The locomotive stopped in front of them, and the passengers invite them aboard. Inside the train, they found plenty of water to share, and a doctor immediately examined Mitsu's ankle and bandaged it. While talking with the family, he asked where the father was. The simple question made the children burst into tears again. On the other hand, we see Yoshi's body stranded on the riverbank. Fortunately, he wakes up completely disoriented. He manages to stand and starts walking, but he's so weak that he collapses next to an abandoned tractor. At that moment, he sees the train passing in the distance. He doesn't have the strength to shout, but he remembers that he still has the flare they found days before. Gathering what little energy he has left, he manages to light it. Mitsu immediately spots the signal from one of the train windows, and the locomotive manages to stop, so his children can run to join their father. After believing him dead for several days, the family embraces each other again, overcome with emotion. Later, back on the train, the family gives him the wig, but he decides to get rid of it.
When they arrive at the station, to the village where Grandpa Sasaki lived.
Thus, 2 years and 126 days pass exactly, during which the family has learned to live together. We see them living happily, fishing for their food, harvesting their vegetables, and weaving their own clothes. One day, Yoshi wakes up to the distant sound of something he hasn't heard in a long time. Following it, he discovers an old alarm clock working again inside a warehouse. Shortly after, the town's loudspeakers once more broadcast a melody, and all the residents come out of their houses when they see the streetlights come back on. Days later, the former residents of Tokyo gradually return to the city. On television, the various experts present several theories about the origin of the blackout, from a solar flare to a comet that passed too close to Earth, but some believe it was a terrorist attack. Their experience completely changed the Suzuki's family. Now they spend much more time together. They no longer fear during household chores and even install an old landline telephone in their home. Yoshiyuki continues to use his bicycle to get to work, even though electricity has been restored. One day, the postman delivers a letter to them. Upon opening it, they're delighted to discover the photograph that the Sotu family's son took of them during the journey, a moment of everything they experienced while struggling to survive. And after everything that Suzuki family went through, I don't think the survival family is telling us to give up on technology, but rather remembering that this shouldn't make us detached from our loved ones and the beauty around us. Because even when everything around us falls apart, we can still find joy in the simplest things, sharing a meal, helping each other, looking at the stars, or simply being together. Maybe we don't need a blackout to remind us what's actually worth keeping.